Mike Tyson has made it very clear that Jake Paul is a much better fighter than most people give him credit for. He doesn't believe the YouTuber turned boxer should be dismissed just because of how he entered the sport. In Tyson's eyes, winning matters, and Jake Paul keeps finding ways to win. Tyson explained that even if Paul's opponents weren't the most respected or considered elite, the fact remains that they were expected to beat him, and yet they didn't. For that, Tyson believes Paul deserves recognition because he's overcoming challenges against fighters who many assumed would expose him. Tyson emphasized that Paul is beating opponents who, on paper, he shouldn't even be able to defeat, which proves his skills are real and not just hype. When asked whether Jake Paul's skill makes a potential fight between them interesting, Tyson admitted that while he didn't always take Paul's call-outs seriously, the idea has become intriguing. He even acknowledged that Paul's competence makes the matchup worth considering. That alone is a huge statement because Tyson's opinion carries massive weight in the sport. Having fought and dominated some of the hardest punchers in boxing history, if Tyson says someone can fight, it means something. Paul has also been making waves outside of the ring, not just with his opponents, but with how his fights are delivered to fans. His most recent announcement, that Netflix will stream his fights, is being described as a groundbreaking move for boxing. For years, boxing has relied on the pay-per-view model, but piracy and changing viewing habits have damaged its value. Jake Paul has leaned into streaming as the future of combat sports, and with Netflix's global reach, it signals a new era. Fans who might never have considered paying for a traditional fight are now being exposed to boxing through one of the world's biggest platforms. Tyson himself acknowledged how important this was, noting that the sport had gone through the television era, then the pay-per-view era, and now it's shifting into the streaming era. Netflix taking boxing seriously, Tyson suggested, will make things even more unpredictable and exciting. When discussing a possible fight between Jake Paul and Gervonta Tank Davis, reactions have been split across the boxing community. Mike Perry, known for his blunt takes, heavily criticized the idea of Tank stepping in with Jake. He argued that Tank isn't the same fighter he once was, especially when it comes to the knockout power that made him famous. Perry suggested that Tank has lost some of his passion for boxing, and without that hunger, it's difficult to beat someone who is bigger, stronger, and more motivated. The sheer size difference is undeniable. Jake Paul often walks into the ring at 200 pounds or more, while Tank has spent his career fighting around lightweight. Perry warned that a weight gap of 80 to 100 pounds changes everything. Bigger fighters absorb shots differently, dish out more punishment, and alter the rhythm of the fight entirely. Trainer Greg Hackett took a more balanced approach, saying that Tank fighting Paul is mostly a financial move, not desperation. Hackett argued that there's no shame in chasing a huge payday. Boxing, after all, has always been about money as much as glory. He reminded fans that Tank's career wouldn't be ruined by taking a fight with Paul. Instead, it's a smart decision that gives him financial security. Hackett insisted that critics shouldn't disrespect Davis for taking a money fight, because every fighter ultimately looks for opportunities to cash in. He compared it to people in business. Sometimes it's not about the purity of the craft, but about securing the best deal possible. On the other hand, Timothy Bradley dismissed the whole concept as nothing but a circus. He was particularly offended by the weight difference, saying it goes against the principle of fair competition in boxing. For Bradley, allowing a 135-pound fighter to face someone naturally over 200 pounds undermines the sport's credibility. He believes these kinds of matchups turn boxing into spectacle rather than sport, prioritizing money over legitimate competition. His frustration reflects that of traditionalists who feel modern boxing is straying too far from its roots. Some analysts like Showbiz the Adult think Jake Paul could actually beat Tank Davis because of the physical mismatch. He pointed out that Jake's size, reach, and natural punching power could allow him to impose his will in the fight. While Tank has speed and technique, Showbiz argued that Paul's strength and durability would give him the edge. That's why he predicts Paul could land heavy shots on Tank, who might struggle to overcome the physical disadvantages. On the flip side, boxers like Shocker Stevenson have dismissed Jake's chances completely. Stevenson argued that Tank Davis would simply outbox Paul and win easily on points. He pointed out that Tank has the ring IQ to frustrate Paul and make him look amateurish. However, some still have doubts about Tank's ability to actually knock Paul out. Tank is known for his counterpunching style and devastating knockouts at lighter weights, but critics note that he hasn't shown the same power recently. His last fight against Lamont Roach raised questions because he couldn't visibly hurt or drop Roach, a naturally smaller fighter. If Tank struggled to make an impact against someone of Roach's caliber, how could he hope to stop someone as large and durable as Paul? This doubt has made many believe that Tank won't knock Paul out. Observers argue that knockout power doesn't always translate across weight classes. What drops a lightweight may not even faze a cruiserweight-sized fighter like Paul. Tank's punches may land cleanly, but whether they carry enough force to inflict real damage on a man nearly 100 pounds heavier is the big question. Former champion Timothy Bradley wasn't the only one to call the whole thing a sideshow. Rising star Bruce "Shoo Shoo" Carrington expressed disappointment at what these kinds of events mean for the sport. He criticized the fact that Paul has mostly faced older or less skilled opponents, and now Tank, who once had a fearsome reputation, isn't at his absolute peak either. Carrington worried that boxing is drifting further toward entertainment-driven matchups instead of meaningful competitive fights. He warned that if fighters like Paul and his financial backers continue to dictate the biggest events, the younger generation might follow the same path, prioritizing paydays over legacy. Still, others argue that Paul isn't just chasing money, he wants legitimacy. They believe that by fighting someone as skilled as Tank, Paul is attempting to prove himself as a real boxer. Since the start of his career, Paul has battled for respect. Each time he wins, he silences critics slightly, but his detractors always point out that he hasn't beaten a prime, top-tier opponent. For Paul, Tank Davis represents legitimacy. If he can beat or even compete on near equal terms with Tank, it would earn him the respect he's been seeking. Some have compared it to the first Rocky movie. If Paul can simply survive and make people question the outcome, he will gain the respect of the boxing world. Mike Tyson's own experience sparring Jake Paul also gave credibility to Paul's power. Tyson admitted that after their sparring session, his body was sore all over, from his chest to his stomach. This shocked many fans who believe Paul's punches lacked real impact. Coming from Tyson, a man who both delivered and absorbed some of the hardest shots in history, his words carried a lot of weight. It suggested that Paul's physicality is legitimate, not manufactured hype. Despite all the debate, some insist that the fight shouldn't even be taken seriously because it's billed as an exhibition. They argue that exhibitions are designed to entertain, not to truly test fighters under competitive conditions. For these critics, fans should lower their expectations because the fight won't resemble a real contest. Instead, it will be about showmanship and generating buzz. They compared it to an advertisement where the product looks better than it really is, flashy but not authentic. If the fight is indeed an exhibition with shorter rounds and looser rules, the intrigue of whether Tank can beat Paul fades away. Instead, it becomes a spectacle for the cameras and an opportunity for both men to make money without real risk. The speculation about whether Tank can knock out Jake Paul ultimately comes down to style, size, and purpose. If Tank intends to outbox Paul and win on points, he could make it look easy. His skill set, speed, and experience are far beyond Paul's. But if the goal is to knock Paul out, that's a different story. Critics argue Tank no longer fights with the same ferocity and that his knockout power has diminished in recent years. They question if he even has the drive to pursue that kind of finish, especially against a larger opponent. Meanwhile, Paul's size and strength advantages make him more durable, raising real doubt about whether Tank can put him away. In the bigger picture, the event is another reflection of where boxing is headed. Spectacle fights, celebrity crossovers, and streaming deals are shaping the sport's future. Traditionalists hate it, but promoters and fighters recognize the money and attention it brings. For Tank, fighting Paul is about securing a massive payday while still having the chance to return to normal competition afterward. For Paul, it's about respect and legitimacy. And for fans, it's another debate-filled event that blurs the line between sport and entertainment. So the question remains, can Gervonta Davis knock out Jake Paul? Many argue he won't. His recent performances suggest his knockout reputation may not carry over against someone of Paul's size and durability. Instead, if Tank wins, it might be by outboxing Paul, frustrating him with movement and piling up points. Paul, on the other hand, only needs to survive or land a few heavy shots to shift the narrative in his favor. No matter the outcome, the fight itself, whether seen as a circus or as history in the making, will command attention, spark debate, and keep boxing in the spotlight. That's the essence of the matchup. Tank's reputation as a knockout artist colliding with Jake Paul's hunger for legitimacy, all under the spectacle-driven new era of boxing where money and entertainment rule as much as legacy. Whether fans love it or hate it, this fight symbolizes what the sport has become, and its outcome will influence how people view both fighters moving forward.